rented a house near the boys. You know, he's actively trying to co-parent with Susan. He wants to be part of his kid's life. You know, they bought a house. He's renting one basically just kind of down the street so he can pop in. He can babysit. He can look after the boys for Susan. Well, it's during this time that, you know, Tom breaks off the affair, which was October 17th, 1994. And he does it in a letter.
Oh, that's kind of like getting a text.
It's better than a post-it note.
Well, at least it took him longer to write a letter, I reckon. And he had to go to the post office.
Yeah. Well, she falls into a deep depression. She's skipping work. She's drinking. She's stalking him. Calling the bar. Asking her friends, have you seen him? Is he talking about me? Is he with someone else? What's he wearing? Does he look sad?
Yes. Is he thinking about me? Can you tell if he's thinking about me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is not good.
She is not dealing with his rejection well at all. On October 25th, 1994, remember that's when she loads the kids up in the car, hits the road. We'll get back to that story now. It was about 9 p.m. when a woman had kind of settled into the house watching TV. It's dark, late at night. Well, 9 p.m. She hears this noise, like outside, kind of on the porch. So she naturally is curious what's going on. Finds Susan Smith sitting on her porch crying. That's when Susan hysterically breaks into the story about this black man who carjacked her at this intersection, held her at gunpoint, made her drive, kicked her out of the car, drove off with her 2 babies inside. This woman, you know, she's like, oh my gosh, gotta help this poor woman. Gets her husband to call 911.
He probably went, Perry, go find your gun and your bullet.
They are, you know, really concerned. I mean, what would you do if someone just came knocking on your door or you heard someone outside and this is the story they're telling you? Well, in our neighborhood, we might assume they're on methamphetamine, but... Well,
and also coming to our house in particular, we're going to run through some scenarios and body language and, you know, that stuff. So if they can convince us to call the police, then it's probably real.
You're funny. Well, during the days that her sons are missing, Tom Finlay called to the house to basically, you know, offer up sympathy, condolences.
Yeah, he might have been offering resources.
I'm really sorry for what's happening to you.
This dude's got loot.
Hope that they find your boys, that everything is going to be okay. You know, just trying to wish her well. Concerned guy, trying to be a good friend. Plus, you know, she's employed at his parents' company.
He may care for her to a degree. I mean, they've been having a relationship.
Gave her that, I want to be friends, and maybe he meant it. But witnesses say that during this conversation, Susan was more interested in talking about her relationship with Tom.
So she's just happy to have contact with
Not
him.
mentioning her kids. Just wants to talk about, can we see each other? Will you come over? Can we get together? Tom even expressed to other people how, disgusted he was by the conversation. He expressed to Susan on the phone that he just wasn't interested in being with her. He was concerned about her kids. He was wishing her well. He really hoped everything was going to work out. Quickly gets off the phone, never calls her again.
Because that's gross.
And then tells people what had happened, and he was like, it's really weird that she didn't seem concerned at all about her kids during the conversation.
She wasn't. I'm gonna say it. She wasn't concerned about her kids.
The trial kicked off in 1995. July 18th is when it began. The prosecution paints a picture of Susan Smith as a woman who murdered her children simply because they were obstacles in her love life. Her defense team said that Smith was a suicidal woman who had accidentally killed her children. A psychiatrist diagnosed Smith as a major depressive with a dependent personality disorder. She was sentenced to life in prison and she was housed at the Camille Griffin Graham Correctional Institution in Columbia, South Carolina. But 2 correctional officers were charged with having sexual relations with her sometime in the early 2000s. So she was moved to the Leith Correctional Institution in Greenwood, South Carolina.
Okay, so those are a couple of geniuses there, right?
And I've read a few articles where they say she's not allowed to be alone with, like, male correctional officers.
Is she that manipulative?
Because she seemingly has sex with them when she's alone with them. And there have been some reports that she's she's into self-harm and has gotten in trouble a few times for cutting herself. I believe she's tried to commit suicide a few times while she's been in prison.
Didn't somebody whoop her ass?
Let's hope so.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know I was kind of left field, but I believe somebody stomped her ass at some point.
Well, I have a hard time imagining a lot of those women who are away from their children,
right,
are going to be real happy with a
What's no different than the rapist and the molester goes with the daddies over in big boy jail.
Well, I think often in the Susan Smith story we forget David Smith, the boy's father.
Yeah, I know, because he was engaged. He seemed genuine. What you saw of him in the press.
Well, I think, he and Susan may have had a terrible marriage, but he loved his boys.
I think they were just young, and they both had baggage, and they were just young. We all went through our little fits of dumb things when we were young, and maybe not healthy relationships, right?
I was perfect. I'm just kidding.
I knew
you must be talking about my first marriage. But David Smith, he's given some interviews, as time has progressed. And
right.
I did see one interview with him on the Dr. Oz show, and he was saying, every day it does get a little bit easier to deal with the grief, but that it's something you never get over. And he said the really tragic part of this grieving process was, his children are murdered. He finds out his ex-wife, his wife,
who he probably still cares for, in a way.
I mean, this is the mother of his children.
Right.
That she's killed these children, and she's lying to everyone.
I couldn't
lying
imagine.
to him.
All those feelings wrapped up in that.
So he's got all of that going on, plus this trial, and he said that for like a year, 2 years after the murders, he couldn't leave his house. Everywhere he went, there was a news camera shoved in his face. People trying to get interviews with him.
That's disgusting.
Calling his house.
You got to leave these people alone.
And he's like, there was no room to grieve.
No.
Because I was constantly
on guard.
On a stage.
Yeah.
And, then of course people are angry with Susan, so some of that anger shifts, you get blamed.
You must have known something, blah, blah, blah.
You should have stepped in.
Yeah, and it sounds like he was an engaged father who would have happily taken full custody of his boys, I'm going to guess. That's what he seemed like to me back then.
Really sad.
And so why didn't you just give him the kids?
Well, that's what I don't understand either. Some psychiatrists have spoken out and said that Susan Smith's narcissism made her see the kids as more of an extension of herself than as individual human beings.
Wow.
So she didn't even look at her kids as these are two living creatures that are their own person and their own free will, and that she just saw them as they're mine. To
deal with how I'd want to.
Yeah. And she says, of course, she's not a monster. She's come out in interviews later, here we are 20-something years later, saying that she's not a monster. Something went terribly wrong. She just felt suicidal, and she thought she couldn't kill herself and leave her boys behind, so she was going to kill all three of them.
Right, you should start with yourself.
She felt like it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Right. I just don't... if every person who went through the kind of the traumas, and she went through a lot, I actually didn't know about a lot of that. Does get my heart a little bit for her, more than I've ever felt. But a lot of other people go through those traumas too.
They do.
In various ways, some worse, some not as bad. But I want anybody out there to raise their hand if they had a perfect childhood that was just this movie, fake Disney childhood that was perfect all their entire lives. I'm going to venture to guess not many people would have their hand up, because we all had stuff we dealt with. And just turning on your own kids like that, that's the part I can't get. And that's the part that makes me hate her.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, everybody's had shit.
Well, again, there's that whole theory that Susan thought getting the kids out of the way was going to free her up to be with Tom.
Right. And maybe in her mind, total speculation, she thought even just giving them off to the father, they're still there. He's still, like, she wanted finality.
She did.
She wanted them gone completely, not at somebody's house.
She wanted attention.
Right.
She wanted these kids gone. She wanted this guy to come running to her. Oh, I feel so sorry for you. Scoop her up like the White Knight.
That's why she couldn't contain herself when he did reach out in more of a friendly way, it seemed, or just to support her. Couldn't help but talk about their relationship and her.
And again, she had come from somewhat of that upper middle class lifestyle.
And she was dying to get back to it.
This guy had money, was single, kind of like the bachelor around town, and she wanted that more opulent lifestyle. So one could piece together that, yeah, she thought getting the kids out of the way, she could be with Tom, she could go back to having money, being,
with the
kind of fancy
guy around town, being known,
being like, the big fish in the little pond kind of thing.
Right.
Plus, she's just a flaming narcissist.
I wonder if she was made that way, or if she was born that way. So it's psychopath or sociopath. What do you think? If
I
you had to call
definitely think a lot of her trauma could play out as being like this narcissist, but part of me thinks that she just was kind of this
she's
way.
Missing a part in her brain. That's where I mean, they claim
because
that's
there's been some speculation, and I'm not going to get into all the semantics of, yes, she was a teenager, and regardless, her stepdad, she's not consenting, even if she is, because she's a kid, and there's all that. However, there were some people who were saying she's claiming she's being molested by her stepdad, but her behavior is she's like competing with her mother as if she's a grown woman for his attention.
Right.
Making it look like I'm a romantic interest competing with my own mother, the wife.
Right.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Well, and that could be some kind of...
Some people say she was into this. Other people are like, oh no, she's a victim. But there definitely were some sexual issues happening with her. Yeah. And I don't know if that came from her traumatic childhood.
Well, some could say that's...
I don't know.
Maybe her reacting to being molested. I mean, that's such a, chunky part, gray area in that.
Right.
But I see what you're saying. But some could say, well, it might be, like sometimes you're either promiscuous or totally withdrawn and shy after traumas like that. So who knows? But I think it's interesting that the cops or the jailers tending to have sex with her. Okay. Well, that's not the first woman in the woman's prison area that's like, hey, you can, whatever, you can get some of this. I think it shows a level of manipulation for her to get them. You know what I mean?
I think we could also safely say that Susan Smith be horny. She's horny for justice.
2 Live Crew up in here. Okay, yeah. Just dated myself.
I always said...
but yeah, she could be a master, but maybe there was manipulation in play with the stepfather. That's really touchy to even say.
But, it's just something that I did read and thought I would float out there just
but
to
let
people know that
there's no telling, but like I said...
There's a lot of pudding out there, folks.
She went through a lot.
She did.
A lot. Heaped on trauma on top of trauma and not even getting a chance to deal with the other trauma. I mean, those are all big ones. I mean, that's bad. That's a big load. But at the same time, I don't see how you kill your fucking kids. I think that would make you hold them closer and keep them closer to you and protect them if I'd been through all that shit she'd been through. But maybe so you got, maybe she's either born that way, a psychopath, or she was made that way, a sociopath.
Well, this is crude, but I always heard that no amount of dicks are ever going to fill that void of your father's love.
Well, and that is sadly true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this has been the case of Susan Smith.
Yes,
Union,
it has.
South Carolina.